Welcome to the Everything Everywhere Travel Writer Podcast. Join award-winning freelance journalist Joan Matsui. Each week, you'll hear guests from all walks of life share their travel stories, tips, and advice on a variety of travel-related topics. Thanks for spending time with us today, and now it's time to dive into our interview.
Everything in nature is connected, according to my guest, Vinnie Cotrone, Penn State University educator and forester. Please welcome Vinnie to our show. Before we get started, would you tell us more about your background and some of the work you've done?
Okay, so I am a trained forester with a degree from Syracuse. It's the Forestry College, SUNY ESF, State University of New York, College of Environmental Science and Forestry. Graduated from there. Got my master's from Michigan State in forestry and urban forestry. I worked in a former life before working for Penn State for New York City Parks Department.
Oh, wonderful.
And part of their it was a capital project, the street tree plantings throughout the 5 boroughs. We actually had a very large budget, and that was the late 80s that I was doing that. I've been with Penn State University now for 32 years. I am an extension educator. I'm a regional urban forester, so I work 18 counties in the Northeast. Main focus is to work with municipalities and the green industry. And the green industry really is the folks who care for trees and plant trees. So it could be landscapers, arborists, and so forth, to both provide some education and assistance. So municipalities, it's working with the municipalities so that they develop tree care programs whereby they replant, care for, certainly remove some trees that are declining and might be high risk. So helping them at the municipal level develop programs. We are in partnership. We work closely with DCNR, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Bureau of Forestry in the state, and the USDA Forest Service. So we work closely with them. They help support our program. So it's really this huge partnership. And the focus has been over the last 30 years to sort of wake up municipalities to the fact that those trees in your community are providing vital benefits. And they need management. They shouldn't just be neglected. If they are neglected, they really sort of get a bad name for themselves when they start falling apart and dropping branches on cars or across the street or taking out power lines. So the role is really to assist and educate on the management of creating what we call community forests. So it's interesting. When I started, I came from a big city working in urban forestry. Well, when I call and work with Towanda or Tunkhannock, they don't consider themselves urban, even though there is a downtown, there are street trees, there are power lines, and very similar issues, but they are a community. So community forestry sort of sums up what we do, because our role is not to go out and work, in a sense, in the forests and produce timber or those sorts of things, right? So it's about the trees in town that provide numerous benefits to people. That's really the role of community forestry.
What is the distinction with urban forestry in terms of community? Are you talking about only in the cities, or are you talking about the communities surrounding a city area?
Yeah, I mean, and that's really just it. I mean, I think many years ago, it was city forestry and urban forestry was in cities. Everyone lives in a community. So, even just we see where new development moves out into suburbia, or I'll take the Poconos, for example, right? So the Poconos in the last 30 years has grown tremendously. And whatever we can do to, keep the natural resources there, manage those natural resources, some of that now is even preventing invasives from coming in and displacing the natives, or it is just, how do you build a new development and protect and preserve those trees? So there's a lot that goes into it, and really the role has just sort of expanded. So in a sense, everybody deserves to live around trees. Doesn't matter
Right.
whether you're in suburbia or in the city, or again, ultra urban schools deserve trees. We're doing a lot to try to work with schools. So that's the focus.
Is preserving the trees that we've already got equally as important as planting new trees?
So if you look at the data, the research that the Forest Service and I'll just throw out the term iTree. iTree is a suite of software that the Forest Service has developed with years of research behind it. They've even taken iTree, that is designed for municipalities, to begin to quantify the benefits of those trees, and now it's available for the homeowner to do it for their single tree. I think it's the National Tree Benefits Calculator. And what it is the research that we've, again, the last 30 years or so, begin to quantify some of those benefits that trees provide us. And what all the data supports and shows is that the bigger the tree and the bigger so the benefits are in the canopy when we're talking about some of the benefits we're talking about. So if we're talking about intercepting stormwater and reducing erosion and flooding in our communities, it's in that big canopy. So you can't replace an 80-year-old canopy with a 2-inch tree, right? It's a 2-inch caliper tree. Maybe, if we're lucky, has a canopy that's 8 by 8, right? Compared to something that's
Huge umbrella.
6 feet, huge umbrella, right? So,
Right.
and that's just stormwater. If we're looking at benefits to wildlife, same thing. If we're looking at benefits to carbon sequestration, the bigger the tree, the more carbon it's going to take in, right? The more pollution. So carbon is just one thing, because we know that trees, back to sort of what I say, 4th grade science, right? Trees make their own food. They're green plants. Photosynthesis happens. They take in carbon dioxide. They give off oxygen, but at the same time, they're making food and wood for themselves. So we call it sequestration. They are sequestering carbon out of the atmosphere, storing it in wood. So the bigger the tree, the bigger the canopy, the more carbon sequestration. The other piece of that is air pollution. So aside from carbon, some people say, well, carbon's not air pollution, right? That's a whole argument that the polluters are making, right?
Right.
So aside from carbon being sequestered, trees also adsorb on their leaves, right? Things like nitrous oxides and sulfur dioxides and something called PM10 and PM5, which are particulate matter. PM stands for particulate matter. So that's all the stuff in the air that we breathe that isn't good for our lungs. Think about it. They're filtering that out when they're in leaf. So the big trees have anywhere from 8 to 10 times more benefits that they're providing than the smaller trees. They just are. It's size of canopy and quantifiable. Now, when that tree is that's providing those benefits, when that tree is healthy and functioning. If that tree's not healthy, if it's dying, that's another story. Right? That's then we go into management mode of, okay, it's time to take the tree down before it falls, because in the forest, a tree can fall and they turn into soil. In the city, they probably turn into a lawsuit, right? So I'm a forester. I understand tree removal, but we see, and you and I have been talking about this a bit, is that trees get removed in many of our communities because they're devalued. Because many people don't understand the values that this 30 plus years of research has shown us, or they just think they're replaceable. Well, that big tree lifted my sidewalk, or that big tree's in the way of my new development, or don't worry, we'll fix it. After we cut them all down, we will replace them. You're not going to get the same benefits. And it's great that we're replanting. And that's a must, I think, because we're still losing ground. But it's going to take 60, 80 years before we're really getting those benefits. So it really is important to try to save as much canopy, and especially native canopy. I mean, we're still learning that the connection of these native trees to the insect populations that then are connected to songbird populations really is critical. Everything in nature really is connected. So when we begin to change things so much, and we remove, say, the native oaks, and we start removing the native oaks, and we're replacing them with Asian calorie pear trees, right? Because, they flower, they're smaller, they look right.
Or dogwood, or there are a variety of trees.
You're not going to get the same benefits in the future anyway, but you're also disrupting the food source for some of these songbirds. So again, everything is connected. I mean, and it's change in habitat. It's not just even insect food source, it's change in habitat. So preserving as much as we can is really important. Now, again, I'm a forester. I'm realistic.
Right.
New something's going in here. It's going to get removed. Okay, we have to fight and argue to get trees replaced. I even say that in commercial development, we see so much, one of the fastest growing land uses is parking lots, because we take our cars everywhere we go, right? But we can, and we have examples all across the United States where we can incorporate trees properly, providing them enough space to grow, shade those cars, cool that environment, because we know that someone's living downwind of that parking lot, and their neighborhood's going to get warmer at night because they live next to a parking lot. So incorporating some green, and we call it green infrastructure, can not only manage stormwater, it can manage what we call urban heat island. It can manage, again, carbon sequestration and pollution levels. We even know from Forest Service research that those cars that are sitting there in a hot parking lot, gas volatilizes and is emitted from the gas tanks. So shading them, we can reduce some of the emissions, but even shading them, we can cool them, right? Which means less energy being used, right? So, and less energy being used downwind, that neighborhood downwind that is now hotter at night because they're next to a big box store parking lot.
There was some type of an insect that songbirds typically
caterpillars. Yeah.
And I found that fascinating because I did not know anything about that.
So again, we keep learning, and that's so that's sort of the beauty of research too. I mean, I work for Penn State, I work for an educational institution. Somebody would say I'm biased, but we do need to keep learning. There are things we haven't discovered yet, right? And what we have seen, and interestingly, it's come from an entomologist from the University of Delaware, a gentleman by the name of Doug Tallamy, who Doug Tallamy has really studied insects all his life, but most people look at insects as problems, right? They eat our plants. Let's treat them. Let's spray them. Let's get rid. We are discovering, and again, just in the last 20, 30 years, we need those insects for pollination. We not only need those insects for pollinating the food that we eat, some of those insects really, they don't destroy the tree, but they live off that tree. So there are caterpillars, native caterpillars. There are over 500 species of caterpillars, right, that turn into moths and butterflies, and that feed on oak trees. And oak trees, again, as a native species, can harbor that many different species of these caterpillars. And you might think of this as, it's a bug, right? But if you're a songbird who is nesting in the vicinity, maybe in that oak tree, those caterpillars are a nutritious, high protein, soft food source that the mother bird takes back to the nest and helps those fledglings grow. And without that food source, we've seen, and Doug Tallamy's research has really seen, that populations of songbirds, there's fewer young that will survive. It really is a challenge until, most people think birds come out, they're young, they're off and they fly and they're
And we feed them. We
seeds, and
feed
we
them in our
feed them.
bird feeders, right? So
Exactly.
they're all right.
But young birds do not eat those things. They need high protein, squishy bugs, right? And a caterpillar, a native caterpillar, is just that. Non-native stuff, for the most part, isn't getting eaten by them. So if that were the case, we'd probably have solved the, Japanese beetle problem by now.
Right, right. One of something that I think is important for my listeners to know are tree basics. Take us back to, I would say, how a tree grows, and what are some of the determining factors about whether that tree will survive or not. For example, an acorn. I've got little acorn sprouts all over my yard this year. I had more acorns from last season than I ever remember seeing. And, I'm plucking them out of my plants and there are a lot of them. But I think it's important to understand how trees grow.
So think about this. In a forested setting, trees grow on their own. And in the northeastern hardwoods, that's basically the type of forest we're in. If the seed source was there, right? So you say those acorns are there. What typically happens if an acre of forest was harvested, so let's say we're harvesting it for wood, we say we're regenerating a new forest. That seed source is there. If we could keep the deer away, if we could keep disturbance away, we get about 1,000 trees. I probably get several thousand trees per acre that start off. In the end, sort of as we're nearing maturity, there's about 100 trees per acre. So a lot of those trees don't make it in a natural setting, but as long as they have a place to grow, they're going to need some sunlight. They're going to need some soil and some nutrients and water, right? Taking that same tree, though, and trying to grow it in an area where they're competing for space, where we, with us, basically, and the stuff, right? Cars.
Right. Big one.
Roads.
Yes.
Parking lots, overhead power lines, right? Those trees are constantly competing first for space. And it's not just above ground growing space, it's below ground rooting space, right? And they need probably just as much below ground space as they need above ground. Now, above ground, they need sunlight, right? They're capturing energy. And trees, if you think about it, trees are really tough and very resilient. They can't get up and move. They're stuck there, right? So they either get enough water that year or they make less energy and they shut down and they shed their leaves earlier in the fall. If they don't get enough water, they go through a drought. I mean, think about how many droughts, if you go out and you look at trees that are 100 years old, right? And there's lots of them around here. How many droughts they must have gone through, right? Over the course of 100 years. They have mechanisms to deal with that. What they don't have mechanisms to deal with very well is things we inflict upon them. So cutting off their roots to put new sidewalks, that's going to cause some major stress and decline of that tree, right? Cutting too much of the top off. I see this repeatedly. People look at trees and, they're too big. I'm going to top it. That's where their food source is coming from. It's not coming from the bag of fertilizer. It's being made by green leaves, that chlorophyll. So we cause stressors to trees. But again, I mean, what they really need is room. They certainly need water and some nutrients. They don't need a lot of nutrition. They don't really need to be fertilized heavily, like maybe your garden plants or your grass, or right.
Or hydrangea or a bush like that.
They're very resilient. Some of them are slower growing. Some of them are tougher than others. Some of them will deal with wounds better than others. But what typically happens is where we are competing for space with trees tend to lose, right? I mean, where we have lots of machines to cut off roots. We have chainsaws. Yes. Right. I explain this and nothing against the power companies. We deliver power the way we did 100 years ago. Uninsulated lines on red pine poles. It's the cheapest way to deliver power. So if a tree grows towards that power line, the tree's going to lose. It's going to give,
Right. Right. We're not
So
moving the.
we're not moving the power lines, those
Right.
lines, right? So some of that I understand. I think there are certainly some solutions. There are some ways to prune. There are, some of the alternatives we've been working on for 30 years is maybe a compatible tree. That's the space where lower growing trees fit, where there's power lines. But where we have room to grow big trees, let's maximize that benefit and plant big trees. I get accused, and you and I were talking about this, picking on grass. I have
Right.
nothing against grass.
No.
My in-laws have a farm, lots of hay fields, lots of grass, but that grass is going to feed some animals, right? Do we need as much grass on a suburban lot as sometimes we have? And if you think about the resources that go into managing that grass, whether it be the gasoline for the mower, the oil for that, the fertilizer, the fungicides, the herbicides, so that it's just grass and no broadleaf weeds. There is a ton of resources and money and chemicals that go into managing the perfect lawn. Now, again, there are places we need grass. And then what I'm suggesting is there are some compromises. Maybe we could give up some of that grass and plant an oak tree.
Right.
That and maybe it's not going to provide all the benefits that we would like in our lifetime, but hopefully that tree is there for your kids, your grandkids, the next generation, even the next homeowner, right? That tree is going to be there providing for those songbirds, for that stormwater management, for that carbon sequestration, which if you think about it, there's folks trying to figure out how do we remove some carbon from our atmosphere because we're past 400 parts per million. There's concerns about climate change. Well, trees, and it's they're going to do it for free. We don't need a factory or a plant that's sucking carbon out of the air. If we reforest areas, we're going to remove carbon. And then if we use that wood, boy, that carbon sequestered and stored in that wood, which is sort of another amazing piece, right? So let's do more work with local wood. So there's this sort of full sort of sustainability cycle that you could think about, but trees in our communities provide more benefits than most people realize. And I think most people look at it and go, they look nice, yes, but it's too big. Again, it lifted my sidewalk. It's in the way of my whatever. I'm going to take it down. Or I hear people who just say it's too big and it's dropping acorns. Oh my, I can't.
And raking. We must have raked 5 different times.
Right. And I understand. I wish we could get the people from the gym to come out and get raked. It's good for your muscles, right? Come rake someone's lawn who maybe is older and can't do that. There are also tons of new equipment, leaf blowers, things that suck up leaves that, so, without us blaming the tree for doing its thing, let's figure out a solution without punishing the tree and removing it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Again, because if we value the benefits, if we understood the benefits that they provide and we value them, then we may make better choices. And I have run into lots of people who do that. And then again, I think there's a lot of people who just don't understand those benefits.
Exactly.
So it's easy to devalue the tree, and it's easy to sort of say the compromise, which is, I will replace it. That makes me feel better. I will replace it. Okay. But why take down a perfectly healthy whatever tree?
Right, whether it's oak, maple, or
now again, if it's defective, take it down, replace it. That's management. But it's sort of mismanagement, and it's a mistake to be punishing trees for some conflict, right? Again,
being in the way or whatever. Yes.
Right.
But when you think about it on a larger scale, when we move into a property and we build a home or we buy a home that's got trees, but more I would say if we build something and we're looking around our yard, which trees should we keep and which ones should we get rid of? Well, we do know that if we're going to build something, chances are if we live in a forested suburban area, there will be trees that we remove.
Right.
I mean, it's just kind of fact of life, sadly, but it is reality. But when you think about the fact that these trees were with us or were there long before we were, I'm talking about the big mature trees. There's a sadness that comes over me when I think about removing something that was there long before I was there, that I came along.
Yeah.
It's
Well, again, it depends on, so I guess, looking at northeastern Pennsylvania, we have hillsides full of trees, so they're taken for granted. If you went somewhere else where there were fewer trees, they would probably be valued more. I've actually run into contractors, developers in Texas that will go out of their way to preserve a big tree, even move. I mean, there are companies that will move big trees and save them and protect them because they look at it and go, there's so few of them. This thing's been here for 100 years. Why are we going to lose that? Plus, they also understand that in the end, they can get more money for that same house because there's trees there, right? So there's property values. We know that someone's going to buy it, probably pay more. It's that curb appeal piece. It's there's a reason it was kept. So I think, again, we take them for granted. That's part of our struggles. And we in the Northeast are surrounded by trees. If you even just go a little further south in Pennsylvania, they're probably protected a little bit more, right? There are people who will go out of their way, even developers who go out of their way to preserve that patch of woods and build their homes around it and design within or around the woods without clear cutting the woods. So again, it's a value piece. And here's what I've been thinking about is that, and I've said this to the Forest Service numerous times, but there just aren't the budgets. So when you watch a commercial and Smokey Bear comes on, you don't even need any words. You don't need any English or Spanish words. You know what that is. That's about forest fire prevention. Mm-hmm. We needed a campaign like that probably 30 years ago or more about the value of trees.
I can remember them vividly also.
Right. The challenges, again, we have in our very market-driven society is that this thing gets lots of commercials, right? Look at the iPhone commercials, right? There's value. People value these things highly. And we're being told we need to value it because you need the new this and you need the new camera. And right, we don't have a marketing campaign for trees. Oh. Right? It really all boils down to educating youth, educating the public. And again, it's sort of a value system is do we value nature and the songbirds that are in that tree and value the benefits we're getting from that tree? And I think we can value both, but sometimes we devalue that for the bigger home,
right?
The more expensive car, the iPhone, right? So that is our challenge. And there are some of us who work in the environmental fields who are really concerned about the next generation missing out on that connection to nature. And will they be willing to, when they become leaders and older, and will they value nature? Or will they be so disconnected because of all the digital devices and the digital experiences that they have, that will they want to fund new state parks, the management of trees, right? The even just the management of state parks. Now, I think enough people do get out and experience. And here's what I will tell you: the pandemic showed the importance of getting outside and connecting with nature. And there were more and more people using trails and parks. I mean, the numbers across the world skyrocketed. I hope we don't lose track of that connection to the outdoors is important. And with that comes all the things that are connected to it, right? So it's not just, you can't really just have a park without having the trees and the birds and the, right, and the different plants. And again, it takes management, it takes resources, and it takes the wherewithal to protect what's there and not say, okay, and I've seen this happen where, there was woods next to a school and, oh, we need more soccer fields. Let's just cut the woods down. And yeah, I could say we need more soccer fields, but at what cost? Take that woods then. Don't the kids need connection to the woods and a nature trail in there? So that is our challenge.
And we do need soccer fields. So we all know that we're not being unreal. Well, we, in terms of people who do value trees, are not being unrealistic in terms of knowing that we do need soccer fields and we do need kids to be able to use soccer fields. But there needs to be a middle ground where there are realistic expectations with trees that cutting everything down does not leave us with any room to learn about nature too, which is another issue.
Well, that's why even, when our work in community forestry is that, I'm not going to tell you that commercial building doesn't need a parking lot, but I can tell you we can maybe lose a couple of parking spaces and have it green and have people actually appreciate that the parking lot is cooler and greener. All it takes is planning and some thought and valuing that piece. And again, making room for those trees. Because as I said, it's about space. It's about room. Someone else would probably argue with me, no, we need those extra 5 spaces. So we can't have trees there.
Right.
And I would say there's got to be some balance, right? So that is our challenge. That is really the message. We know we're not talking about taking buildings down and planting forests again. But we are talking about, do we need that much paved surface? Do we need that much lawn? Can we incorporate some green infrastructure and at the same time get some benefits like energy conservation, stormwater management, which, we don't have pipes big enough to take all the stormwater that comes off of our streets, right?
That was something that is something that I'd like you to talk about. Would be what one tree, not an entire forest, but what one tree can do to help prevent water runoff, and manage stormwater issues.
Okay, so and we have lots of sort of written resources at Extension, at the university cooperative extension website. We've got fact sheets. I've been able to put this stuff together because the focus really has been in the last, I'm going to say 10, 15 years, to work with engineers to design better systems to, again, incorporate green infrastructure and trees. So here's the way I sort of, my analogy for trees. A tree in a city, in a community, is like a big green umbrella when it's in leaf and a big water pump. And here's why. When it is in leaf, a good portion of that rain's never reaching the ground when you get a rain event. And somebody says, well, where does it go? Well, it stays up in the leaves and it evaporates away, right? It's not absorbed by the leaves, it just evaporates off the leaves. Even just the fact that it is slowing down the rain, some of it in a heavy rain is going to drip off the leaves, yes, right? Is reducing that, what we call peak flow. When it rains heavy, and we're getting more and more heavy rains because of climate change, we get this flush of water moving very quickly, washing off paved surfaces, taking those pollutants into a pipe, taking them to a receiving body, a waterway. The challenge is, how do we reduce that amount? How do we slow that down? How do we even capture some of those pollutants? We're doing that through rain gardens and bioinfiltration systems. But the plants then take some of that water, some of those nutrients, some of those pollutants, take it up through their roots. The water is evapotranspiring away, right? That's what cools our atmosphere. That goes right through the plants. And they're storing some of those pollutants either in the woods or the leaves. And again, it's sort of an interesting stormwater system. It also, because it's got a deep rooted system, allows for better infiltration. That's where we want water to go. We want water to go back in the ground so that plants will use it. We don't need water to wash off of
Running off.
or wash, right. And think about it. Grass roots only go so deep. Tree roots, woody plants, going to go much deeper. So a looser soil, more porous. We see better infiltration rates. So we're going to get water back in the ground. Half of Pennsylvanians get their drinking water from wells. So putting water back in the ground is where it belongs to help wells sort of replenish and feed those aquifers instead of it washing down the hill or the road into a pipe, into a stream that then scours out and damages the creek further on down, right?
Right.
So even just the single tree. Now, of course, a bigger tree, better than a smaller tree. And I say that because we've seen where, a 20-year-old red maple can intercept 1,400 gallons. This is just intercept, right? Captured in the green canopy, 1,400 gallons each and every year on average. So that's 20 years old. Take that to 40, 60-year-old. You're capturing now probably 3,000 gallons. And again, we have this Forest Service data. It's research. They've done the experiments. We know that the bigger the canopies, the more stormwater management we get. So, it's how do we get those trees to that size? How do we make room for big trees, right? As I said, we're not going to put those under power lines. It just defeats the purpose. But we need to make room, growing space for those trees so that 30 years from now, 60 years from now, those trees are providing benefits. Otherwise, our communities really are going to suffer.
Please visit joanmatsuitravelwriter.com where you can subscribe to the show so you'll never miss an episode. While you're there, check out the travel writing courses, membership support platform, and private coaching services to help you learn travel writing. If you found value in this show, we would appreciate a rating on iTunes, and don't forget to tell a friend.